the Kamala, I followed the plagiarism stuff because I find it fascinating how much of academia is either outright fraudulent or plagiarized. And it seems, I had a friend of mine, the really kind of brilliant guy, who used to tell me and he was in the science, he was a biochem, and he said most of the stuff that's out there is either sucks or total bullshit. And he said even you'll see something in Science magazine and it'll be bullshit. But here's my defense of Kamala, which I think is the great defense. Of course I didn't write the book. I'm a politician, right? I mean,
100% the person who plagiarized was her ghostwriter.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. It should be, I was going to run for office and said I needed a book. I didn't have time, so I hired the ghostwriter. That's why it says Kamala and him. It's like, I read it, but I didn't know it. I mean, and if you're a normal voter, you would go, okay, that's honest.
Yeah.
You know?
That should be her response, by the way. She's going to say, I'm asking for a refund from my ghostwriter. You know what I mean? Make light of it. Listen, I didn't plagiarize.
Yes. That would be a perfect answer.
All right, Chris, I wanted to start by telling you, so we had the Cruz-Allred debate here last night. We had a couple contests going on. I was sharing with you before we started this recording that we have some private contests going, one of which is a grassroots organization here in Texas. So we had some contests to score for them, and one of them was the debate contest. And I will say, let me ask you: have you seen anything about it? Is there any scuttlebutt in the community about it?
Not about the debate. I do have some kind of interesting polling data from that race though that I can share.
Okay. Yes, please do share. Let me just say, I don't know what the polling data said beforehand, but I would imagine by early voting starts here on Monday. So Colin Allred, man, got his ass kicked. I think there's no way in hell now that Cruz loses.
Really?
Although it was trending in Allred's favor, but it just looks that way from the debate to me. If anybody was using the debate to decide, I think it hurt.
I haven't. Debates are fucking stupid. Debates are hotly debated among consultants. Some people say they don't matter at all. Some people say they matter a lot. They do matter, I think, to undecideds, and they matter to I hate them both voters. And because you go, well, at least they'll go with the smart guy. And debate prep is really hard. And, as Harris and Trump and Biden, who've done this a million times, or even Walz and Vance, it is a really specialized skill set. And a lot of it is not fair. But it's hard. It's like you see professional athletes joke. Right? I mean, Allred's been speaking to groups and doing his shtick for, a year and a half, if not more, because he's been in Congress. So what, half a decade? But, guys strike out at the plate, guys miss, 20-yard field goals. And that's kind of what happens to people because they let the pressure get to them. There is a famous Roger, I'll tell my apocryphal, if I haven't told this already before. As you can tell, it's a couple weeks from the election, and I'm just like running on no sleep. So in 1984, Ronald Reagan loses the first debate to Walter fucking Mondale, if you can believe that. Mm-hmm. And they brought in Roger Ailes to coach him, and this is pre-Fox stuff by a couple decades, by a decade or two. And they had like Dave Stockman and James. They had all these fucking serial killers doing debate prep with Reagan, and they just beat the fuck out of him. And Reagan was kind of like shell-shocked. And Ailes is watching the debate prep where he's got, kind of the super duper bright guys just killing Reagan in the debate. And he says to himself, you're debating fucking Walter Mondale. You're not, and so he spent the rest of the debate, every time Reagan answered something, he says, great answer, Mr. President. That was super. That was perfect. And so literally he just needed to get, Reagan's problem is that he was kind of shell-shocked because, you're debating James Baker, who was Secretary of Treasury, Secretary of State, and maybe the brightest guy ever to be in politics and, managed 3 presidential campaigns. And the guy had a brain like a fucking series of razor blades. And, that wasn't the case. And so it was kind of interesting. But anyway, but it was so a lot of times, like not having a lot of debate prep or having the right kind of debate prep and not being over prepared is helpful. But again, as I always try to tell candidates to calm them down on it, especially at the Senate level, there are only 10 things you could possibly get asked.
Right.
If you get asked the 11th thing or the 12th thing, make it about one of the 10 you know about. And you only need to know about them for 60 seconds. So you only need 140 words. And that's it.
Right.
And then there's the famous Rick Perry story when he forgot in his debate, the famous, right? He said, I'm going to eliminate.
What was the third one? Was it the Department of Education or Energy?
Yeah.
I don't know. One of them was the one he ended up being the secretary of.
Right. And a friend on the campaign kind of coined the phrase. He said, it's okay to step on your dick in a debate, but it's not okay to jump up and down on it.
Right.
But so
that was literally the end of Rick Perry's running for president, was that moment.
Yeah, and there's actually a great story about it. It's that he had back surgery and they had to fly him across the country, and he was on, not the law did, but he was on like, Percocet or something. And what they should have said is no. I mean, part of the debate prep was like, no, don't do this. And so he went on kind of like, on painkillers and no sleep. And it's like, not a good idea. But, but that was it. That was it. It was over.
I mean, I hate to beat up on Colin. I mean, I went to an Allred event. I go to everybody's event that I can. And he spoke in a friendly environment. He spoke rather well. It made sense. But just, how we talked before about putting it on mute and watching it. I mean, he looked like he had taken the lot. Like, he just looked like a deer in headlights. He was very nervous, I think. And I think more importantly, like you said, anybody can, the greatest hitters in history can step up to the plate and whiff, right? So I don't want to bash him too much, but I would say that I don't know, he didn't seem to be prepared for the attacks that were going to come to him, even though the very first question out of the gate basically was, or the first thing that he said was, you've seen all of the ads lately. Like, he knows he's been under attack. He knows it's going to be basically transgenderism. That was the main line of attack, his support for boys and girls sports, which may or may not be true depending on who you listen to. So I was just shocked that it seemed unprepared. But again, you get in that environment, your mind goes blank. You forget to thank your wife when you're accepting your Academy Award type of situation.
So here's my can I tell you my transgender story? And it's interesting to see this play out. So I did a campaign in Florida in 22, and we took out one of the Democratic leadership people, and this was at the height of Don't Say Gay and all that kind of stuff. And so it was not a Republican district. It's a Biden +4 district. And so we focus group tested Democrat women and independents women on Don't Say Gay. And so and this is part of the thing in politics and also as a consultant, sometimes you have to put, or actually all the time, you have to put what you think and what you believe to the side and listen to what the voters think and believe. And so they were marginally against Don't Say Gay, but they had a lot of compassion for the LGBTQ plus whatever we're doing it now, AI or whatever it is, community. And they didn't like the meanness in a lot of the rhetoric, but they were also home during COVID watching their kids do Zoom shit. And if you are a parent, you want your kid to learn. And there was an inordinate amount of time doing essentially, I'm going to categorize it as woke stuff and gender stuff and social things as opposed to learning. And especially the Latino parents, it made them fucking furious. And where they came down on Don't Say Gay and transgenderism is really brilliant and simple and smart. Yeah, okay, people have different views on that, but it's about a handful of kids, and why are we wasting our time making that the fucking centerpiece of everything when there's more important things that we need to do in schools as opposed to this. And the women kind of agreed to disagree about what that, but they kept on going like, this is one kid out of, 800. And this is like 11 kids in the state of Florida that want to play athletics. And it's like, this is what we're spending our time on. And they were furious at the politicians, not for where they stood on the issue, but making this their focus. And so the Democrat that we ran against and beat, this was her big focus. And, in that district, kind of the issue kind of broke in her favor, but her spending all of her time when inflation was out of control and gas prices and housing is incredible, the insurance crisis, all the shit that goes on in Florida. And it's like, and they were like, she's spending her time on this shit. And so, if I was advising Allred, I would have said, this is the attack. We're going to agree or disagree, whatever the germane fact was. But the idea that you've been in the U.S. Senate for 14 fucking years, and this is what you're talking about when people can't buy groceries or afford health care, is why you need to be gone. I mean, that's the answer. And I just did that in about 32 words. But,
totally agree
right?
with you. So much so, by the way, that Cruz gave the best answer about it. What he said was, I will always protect equality for people, but that does not mean allowing boys to play in girls' sports. And by the way, I don't know if that's actually the case, that boys are allowed to play in girls' sports, or that Colin Allred actually was for that. But that answer sums it up so well in such a common sense way that if Allred had chosen that response instead, I think it would have taken the wind out of the sails of that argument.
Yeah.
And then when you add on to it what you said, which is, I don't think that you being a senator for X number of years and that you're still bogged down in this BS, I don't think that shows that you're actually working for the people of Texas. You know what I mean? So, no, 100%.
And that's the answer. And again, because people are willing, there's the filmmaker, I think it was Billy Wilder, was talking about audiences. And he said, individually, they're idiots. Together, they're a genius. And his point was that no matter how much they're hyped, bad movies are not successful. And an individual viewer can miss plot points and not know what's going on. And I mean, the amount of people that if you ever talk to somebody that teaches a film course, students are confused in Pulp Fiction because Vincent is dead in the middle of it and he shows up at the end. And is he reincarnated? Or is Ving Rhames the dead? Right. I mean, you kind of go, and you want to go, are you this stupid?
Yeah.
But it doesn't stop, Pulp Fiction from being a great movie. But Arthur Finkelstein, who was a mentor of mine, and I think the smartest guy in American politics of his generation, used to have this admonition to us younglings. And he said, stop thinking like a politician, stop thinking like a consultant, and think like a voter.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to go that I'll be all academic when you do medicine. Sir William Osler, who was a doctor in Britain, and he said the patient will diagnose himself. That, if you're a good doctor and you listen, you say it hurts here, you kind of go, okay, I'll look at the shoulder, right? The patient will diagnose himself. And it's the same thing. Voters will tell you what it is.
They'll tell you how to win. They give you the key to the kingdom.
They tell you what it is. Yeah, I mean, a woman.
Don't ever worry about going all academic. By the way, we recently got some feedback, and somebody said to me, "Holy shit, Chris taught at Oxford and Cambridge," and I was like, "I don't know. The guy's full of fucking surprises. I guess so."
yeah. You would never know from.
Are we supposed to refer to you as Sir Matola?
Yeah, no, you would never know from my use of profanity and dick jokes. But yeah, and actually it was. And if you ever get a chance to go to Oxford, I taught at Nuffield College. And if you're getting a chance to go to Oxford, it's pretty amazing. It was like I always say, it was like I was the dumbest person in 10 square miles, and it wasn't particularly close.
I saw yesterday that Oxford is older than the Aztec Empire. It
Yeah.
Oxford was built before the Aztec Empire was founded.
Yeah, you can go to
People don't
Oxford
realize how old Oxford is.
and there's tour and it's like Oxford is like, if you've never been there, I mean, think of, it's Hogwarts basically, and it looks like Hogwarts. But you can go there
Yeah.
and you can see, you can go to Cromwell's dorm, for Christ's sake, and it's this little kind of monkish
Oh,
cell that undergrads still stay in, but it's fucking Cromwell's room, and you kind of go,
that's so cool.
but it's really it's but yeah, but it was an interesting, so basically, if you're listening to this podcast, you're getting the updated version of my Oxford lectures, you know but with
We should
but
start
with,
charging Oxford prices, is what we should start doing.
but with profanity, you get that, you get a little more. um
um, all right. So if the voters will tell you what matters, if they'll give you the key, the path to victory,
mhm.
what do you think they're saying, or what do you think they will say about some of the things that have come out recently about Doug Emhoff possibly, I mean, being accused of hitting his
Yeah,
girlfriend? I guess it was in 2011, 2012 in the
yeah,
valet line. Um, uh, there are other things I think which have been confirmed. I mean, it's a confirmed known fact that he knocked up his nanny when he was married, right?
right.
And now there's a lot of talk, maybe rumors, maybe allegations that he was quite the sexual harasser in the workplace as well. So, and then let's just throw in for good measure now that JD Vance, I saw there's a allegation that Kamala plagiarized her book on lawfare or something like that. So these issues, do you think any of it's going to stick and affect the last 24 days of the election?
No, unless, so the Kamala, yeah, I followed the plagiarism stuff because I find it fascinating how much of academia is either outright fraudulent or plagiarized. And it seems, I had a friend of mine, the really kind of brilliant guy, who used to tell me, like, and he was in the science, he was a biochem, and he said most of the stuff that's out there is either sucks or total bullshit. And he said, even you'll see something in Science magazine and it'll be bullshit. But here's my defense of Kamala, which I think is the great defense. Of course I didn't write the book. I'm a politician. Right? I mean,
100% the
answer.
person who plagiarized was her ghostwriter. Like,
Yeah, I mean, that should
yeah.
say, like, it should be, I was going to run for office, and said I needed a book. I didn't have time, so I hired the ghostwriter. That's why it says Kamala and him. It's like, I read it, but I didn't know it. I mean, and if you're a normal voter, you would go, okay, that's honest.
Yeah. That should be her response, by the way. She's going to say, I'm asking for a refund from my ghostwriter. You know what I mean? Like, make light of it. Like, listen, I didn't plagiarize.
Yes. That would be a perfect answer. Like, oh, I'm going to ask for a refund for my ghostwriter, because it acknowledges it acknowledges all good things,
Yes.
and again, I have not read the book, but I'm assuming, and frankly, I've helped in writing books like that. I've never not plagiarized stuff. And actually, it's funny because you have to go back. You when you do that, you kind of go back through candidate speeches and stuff, and you have to make sure they're not plagiarized. A lot easier now with AI, and you just kind of take passages and you throw them in, and it kind of figures it out. But it's
Yeah.
but yeah, no, and that doesn't matter. The Emhoff stuff, I don't think it matters either. Again, this kind of goes to, oh my God, somebody in politics is a shithead and has bad behavior. I mean, I think him hitting somebody, if that is proven, is a different level. I think, and especially in 2012, it's like,
yeah,
I was in my 20s in the club and we were all fucking hammered, and you pushed and shoved, and you kind of go, all right, not great, but you kind of go, I was in my 20s and hammered at the club. But to be an adult and an executive, and if he hit her, and if it wasn't, I mean, if you're listening to podcasts, you see it, but if, like, you just were like yelling and you kind of put your hands up, and she kind of walked into it, it'd be one thing. But if he like physically went across his body and hit her, it's something different. I mean, either way is not acceptable. But you kind of, is there another shoe to is there another shoe to drop? I mean, hey, we saw Kanye this week. Kanye has a lawsuit with his former assistant that says, Conway's wife or Kanye's wife is setting up orgies for him. And you kind of go, I mean, if this is like, it doesn't reflect good on anybody, I don't think it matters, because people kind of go,
totally.
This is white noise. So let's talk about
please.
No, let's talk about Cruz-Allred. So the race is, Trump's up around 5 or 6 in the state, and he's over 50, so he's going to win Texas. The Allred Cruz thing is closer, and Allred's probably a little ahead by like 1 point ahead. But when we say ahead, if you're ahead by 1 point and the margin of error is 4 points, it means who the fuck knows.
Right.
But I'm surprised that Cruz has been able to be outspent. That an incumbent U.S. senator be outspent, and what it looks like, it's all being driven by Cruz's unpopularity, and which is why they're doing so much negative on Allred, because they're making him less popular. Right. What I think is also true in this election cycle, and this is me yelling into the wind like fucking King Lear, positive is much more effective than negative, because we understand politicians are assholes. We understand all this stuff is probably not totally true, but kind of true. So if you are trying to win a close election, giving voters anything germane to their lives is really important. And it doesn't have to be this giant thing. It doesn't have to be, he's a leader to get guns off our streets. And it's like, that shit kind of goes past you. What's better is that, I filled in this pothole at 16th and Vine, and I filled in potholes all across Los Angeles. That, and like, and actually showing the thing, and like, Arlen Specter, who was a former client, we used to do spots all over Pennsylvania like that. And Specter usually had like a net negative or a slight positive. Is that, he was there for 1 million years, and they didn't like politicians being there for 1 million years. But when push came to shove, they would go, well, he got that stop sign put in. He found that woman's check.
He's filling potholes.
He's filling fucking potholes. Al D'Amato was another one of my clients. I mean, he's filling potholes. They used to call him Pothole Al. And, politicians that do these grand soaring things, you kind of go, oh, fuck off. But if you've made my life marginally better, then that helps. And so I think that, the temptation is to run all negative, and you're going to have to fight fire with fire. At the same time, having positive stuff up is really helpful. And especially, it's really helpful in a negative environment. So I did, one of my clients last year was Secretary of State Michael Adams in Kentucky. And the governor's race was incredibly negative. The race, our opponent who outspent Michael Adams, did nothing but negative on Adams. Nothing but negative. We did nothing but positive. And again, it was a discussion with the candidate, and you got to give candidates credit for hearing the game theory and saying, okay, I'm going to let my opponent beat the fuck out of me. But we ran just positive, and the positive TV was very simple. And it said, Michael Adams made it easier to vote and harder to cheat. And on radio, one of the things he did as Secretary of State, which is a really minor thing that falls under the Secretary of State's purview, is that if you were the victim of domestic abuse, he would take your personal information off the state website so you couldn't be found. And so, because what happens is that women move away, they go in there, and the boyfriend's husbands track them down. And what he did is that he removed all that information, in Kentucky, so you could actually hide or move.
Where was the information being stored? Like in a victim's
no, just kind of like
directory?
Just general directory stuff. If you type in somebody's name and address, find your address.
Yeah.
which is a really
Oh,
kind of
like a shield law, like you.
right, like
Right, right.
well put. I wrote the spot and I couldn't remember shield law, but it's a version of the shield law, and
Yeah,
but
yeah,
that resonated more than anything else anybody aired in the entire state because it was
for
something
sure.
specific, it was something helpful,
Yeah.
it was something smart, and so that kind of stuff really works well. And even if you're going to do mostly negative, you have to have a little positive, or else what
And let
happened?
me ask you a question.
Yeah,
This may be specific from state to state, but
yeah,
so in my thinking, something like that specifically is very appealing to suburban moms, suburban women.
yeah.
Is it true generally that in statewide, so like statewide executives, that though that is a core demographic that is swingable, that suburban soccer mom, is she swingable at the federal level and at the statewide executive level?
You've hit the perfect crux of the Republican quandary forever. So
Mm,
that suburban soccer mom, which I think is what we were calling them in during the W. Bush years, was a reliable Republican voter because you could just say crime and safety, and they would be like, "Oh, we're going to vote for the tougher.
mm,
We're going to vote for the put more people in jail one." As Republicans under Trump, and especially with Trump, women are like, "I fucking hate that guy, and I know that guy, and I'm not voting for that guy." And what's
mhm,
happened is that I'm going to call it a radicalization happened in 16, 18, and 20, where these women absolutely went the other way. And they said, well, not only fuck Donald Trump, but fuck anybody who's on the party of Donald Trump. And
mm,
they became not gettable. I figured out a way to get them back, by the way. And it's kind of, you can get them back, but you can't get them back traditional ways. You have to say
mm.
that you understand them,
Interesting.
and it's not a short term negative spot. My opponent killed puppies. It is a longer term
Right.
conversation on a micro level, and it's an
Mm,
investment early on. So if it's 2 weeks out, fucking forget it. If they're going the other way, but so they are the challenge for Republicans at state level, and especially what happens, and then so that was kind of set, and then Roe happens, and
yeah,
the most pro-choice people are frankly suburban white women.
for sure. And did you see the reporting on white women in as a whole? Romney won white women by +9.
Yeah,
Trump in 2016 won white women by +6. In 2020 by +7. And this year he's only +1. He's
yeah,
lost 6 points from 2020.
yeah, and that's
Um,
all Roe. That's all Roe. And
yeah.
I mean, it used to be Republicans won, over six, affluent, educated voters voted Republican in 12. They no longer do that, and
Yeah.
they're voting Democrat. And conversely, poor non-college educated voters voted Democrat in 12, and now they're voting Republican. But yeah, women are
So in
women are a problem. Yeah,
that spot that you did in Kentucky, then was that effective in swaying the suburban
yeah,
soccer mom to,
yeah.
yeah, because they see the value of it, right?
Well, it was a common sense thing. I mean, Adams, led both tickets, even the governor's race. We outpolled the governor's race. He led both tickets,
Mm,
and and it wasn't just a spot that we did that worked. It was that he was seen as a nonpartisan guy who modernized voting systems, and frankly took a raft of shit when he put them in because they were carrot and stick. But Kentucky has a very modern, very accurate, good voting system where if you vote, there's a paper ballot and you get a receipt. So
yeah. Yeah.
and when somebody does try to cheat, which happens, it happens. It happens all the time, and not in a meaningful way. We've talked about
Right.
trying to, you get caught. And so he made it easier to vote and harder to cheat. And I think Kentucky it was 3 weeks, 4 weeks during COVID, but I think it's now 2 weeks early voting. And no excuse stuff. It's easy to vote in Kentucky. It's much easier to vote in Kentucky than it is to vote in like New York or Delaware or Pennsylvania.
Using that as a launch point, did you see the judge's ruling in Georgia prohibiting the elections board wanted mandatory hand recount to tally between the machine and the physical, I guess the night of. They wanted it at each precinct. And the judge, I don't know if it'll hold up, if it'll get appealed, but I mean, they've already started voting. But he said, this is too much, too late. I think was his exact wording in his opinion. It was like, you're going for too much, and it's too close to the election. You should have put this in place 2 years ago. Do you think? By the way, the numbers, I don't know about today, but yesterday, first day of voting, did you see 252,000 in-person early voting? And when you add the absentee ballots, it's 328,000 people have already voted in Georgia as of actually on the first day. Georgia put out a very cool tool, sos.ga.gov. It's a data tool. I don't know if you've seen this, but you can follow the election in real time and see like what the turnout is. I saw earlier today something like 13% of the votes have already been cast. It's massive. So what do you think? What's the effect on Georgia with the ruling and with what's going on there?
Yeah, the joke is, Georgia was what Biden called Jim Crow too, and you're fucking senile old fuck. Georgia's another state with these giant modernized voting systems. That particular ruling wasn't to count individual votes; it was to count the count. So if 200 people voted in a precinct, you just take the votes, it's 200, you send them in, and what they wanted to do was actually count the numbers right there. So there were 200 ballots as opposed to 205 or 198. And that's bullshit. Truth is, it would have probably added a half hour, an hour to the return. But you have a system the system works. It's like 98% of Georgia is registered to vote. It's some fucking insane number.
Wow. That's incredible.
And they voted a higher percentage than most other states. And so Georgia, for all its the crazy shit that people said about Georgia, but I always point out that the same elected officials that were called Klan members when Stacey Abrams lost were called traitors when Donald Trump lost. Like, these guys didn't fucking change.
100%.
But I think that in terms of technology stuff, Georgia has a very transparent system. As opposed, and what Georgia does also is they cleaned up their voter rolls. At my household, I get vote stuff, no matter how many times I've sent it back in and say, not at this address, but somebody that hasn't been at this house for 5 years, and somebody who hasn't lived at the address for almost 25 years. And a million times I've sent you right on the envelope and you send it back, or you write them a letter and send it back, just as a good government thing, and they just keep sending it to you. So
since we're this is perfect, by the way. This is actually fucking perfect. Since we're talking about voter fraud in Georgia, did you see Jimmy Carter cast a vote?
No.
What are the odds? Literally 2 episodes ago, we were talking about how this guy is not. Do you think he cast that vote? I hate to knock the guy or whatever, but we saw the image. I don't think that guy was capable of casting a vote.
Yeah, I don't know how lucid he is. Physically, like, if you were infirmed, you can have assist, and I don't know what the law is in Georgia.
That's right, you can.
You can. But but I don't know if he's with it, or he has mashed potatoes for brains. Right? Who the fuck knows?
Yeah.
right? But I mean, that's.
I thought it was hysterical the number of like tweets that were like, Jimmy Carter lives long enough to cast a vote for Kamala Harris, and I was like, yeah, and you're showing a photo of him with this tweet, and that's not helping the voter fraud claims at all.
Yeah. By the way, would it be funny if Georgia came like one vote, and they had a and lawyers decided to deposition 100-year-old Jimmy Carter? Wouldn't that be?
It'd be.
I mean, that's such a surreal thing. It probably will happen.
So let me ask you a question. I tracked down Google Trends for the last 7 days. I'll tell you the most trending thing on Google over the last 7 days topic is Aurora, and it's up 450%.
Wow.
So, do you think that? I mean, there's nothing that we know about that, about which side that trending search is coming from, right? Is it Democrats? Right. Is it Republicans? What are they taking away from it? But it's certainly being talked about, not at the behest of Democrats, but at the behest of Republicans. It suits Republicans to talk about. In addition to that, what other messages have you seen coming out this election cycle that you think are actually breaking through? And I would wrap Aurora into the border conversation. I think that is actually a traction conversation. What other things do you think are starting to break through in the home stretch here?
I think that the three are abortion, trans, and border. And
okay.
And two of the three does not help Harris. And I think that's part of her problem. But I think that I would, if I was a candidate and you could say you can only pick one of the three, you want abortion. Abortion gives you a lot of stuff. I think that here's my kind of, I'm being interviewed tomorrow and I'm going to give this away. So, on the interview. And
you heard it here first, everyone. You don't need, but still go watch the interview tomorrow.
But without the profanity. So
yeah,
like what happens in the next 2 weeks, and from now till election day, whenever this podcast drops, from now till election day, what are the two things that Harris should be doing and what should Trump be doing? Like, what's the closing message? And I think it's really easy, and they're both doing it. They're both saying that the other person is part of the past and part of the problem, and I'm change. So literally, you've got the ludicrousness of a 78-year-old guy who was president saying I'm change, and somebody who's been part of the government for 20 years and is the vice president saying I'm change. Okay, we know politics is ludicrous, and right, well, I kind of get that. But I think if you're Harris, I think you need to say, here are the three things I will do different than Joe Biden. I think Joe Biden served our country well, much better than Donald Trump, but here is the things I would change. And if you're Trump, and it's going to be hard for her to do that. There's a lot of cross pressure because, there'll be smelling salts and pearl clutching at the White House when she does that. And I think if you're Trump, you take the guy that was a liability and now is an asset, J.D. Vance, who's done really well. From the debate, kind of reframed him. And he's young and he's kind of interesting. I saw him on, it was a CBS, it was some show where the host was talking about, demagoguing immigrants, and specifically with Venezuelans taking over. She said the gangs only took over a handful of apartment complexes. And he was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Like only a handful? Like, what's the acceptable number? So, but he's become a different guy. And I think having him with Trump, because he's younger, because he looks a little different, I think that helps Trump become changed. Because you kind of look and you got Trump, same, but this guy's interesting. He's new.
Right.
Will Trump's ego allow, will Trump's ego allow somebody else to be the focal point, which would help him? And will Harris's timidity allow her to piss on the Biden administration? Now, here's another historical thing. So 1968, Nixon, Humphrey, George Wallace, and it's one of my favorite elections, and I'll oversimplify it, that the number one issue was the Vietnam War. And the reason Johnson did not run again is because the war was so unpopular. Humphrey, until 2 weeks out, maybe it was 3 weeks out, maybe it was end of September, was stuck with being the pro-war candidate because he was LBJ's and he would not break. Finally, he had a speech. He had a big speech, and he said, "The war is wrong. I'm bringing the troops home. That's it." And all of a sudden, boom, 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 boom. He climbed in the polls and he lost to Nixon by, a point or something, by, a handful of votes. And so I think Harris needs to do that. And what she does it on, who knows? But I think she needs that moment because it helps her if the Biden people go, "You're disloyal. That's not our policy." The Biden people calling her disloyal and names helps her because it makes her change. And voters want change, and so who's going to do that?
Can I ask you something about that 68 election and what you just said and get your take on it?
Yeah.
So the historical record shows that Nixon conspired with Anna Chennault to actually torpedo the peace talks between Johnson and the Vietnamese, the North Vietnamese. And he did so to benefit his political campaign, which potentially is a treasonous act, but certainly at a minimum.
Not potentially, it is treason. Yeah.
I don't know if there was actually the law at the time. Now, if a private citizen does that, it's actually a statutory offense. I don't know if it was at the time. Certainly, it seems a treasonous act, so that's why I've labeled it that way. But at a minimum, what he did was guarantee more American boys dying in Vietnam. And Johnson knew about it, and there's actually a recording from the Johnson White House where he says to a middleman, "Tell Anna and Nixon to cut that shit out."
Right.
And so what would the results of that election have been if Johnson or Humphrey came out and said, "We have credible evidence that as we are trying to end the war in Vietnam, Nixon is conspiring with Anna Chennault, the Dragon Lady, to extend it for political gain"?
Yeah, I mean,
why didn't they? I guess my second question is, why the fuck didn't they do that?
There is, and again, it is not. I mean, I've read about it. It is not my area of expertise. Apparently, it was more nuanced than that. And it was definitely private citizens trying to say, and like whether they had any influence at all, like in a perfect world kind of thing. And maybe it was like, and basically, if you're North Vietnam, you go fuck yourself. We're winning, Well,
it was the South Vietnamese. They talked to the South Vietnamese, and they said, "You're going to get a better deal with me. Don't proceed with the peace talks."
Right, and yeah, I'm sorry. Who knows?
Which is, by the way, very similar to what seems to have happened with Netanyahu and Trump in Mar-a-Lago, by the way. Airy similarities there in a way, but
I think the kind of the flaw in that, in part of it, which is why I'm not. Yeah, it definitely happened. We know there were meetings happened. Why I don't think there was to answer your question, why there was not that Johnson moment where he did that is because it didn't exist. And the reason I say that is that, Johnson was a guy with Bill Moyers that were spying on RFK. They were spying on Martin Luther King. They would absolutely fuck anybody for any reason. And the idea that he could fuck Nixon and didn't, that's the piece. But there's no, but I don't think there's any doubt that Anna Chennault and that they were playing footsie, which is, frankly despicable. And again, I think it's treason. Whether it is like me talking to people I know in, I don't know, Mexico, and saying, it'd be really helpful for American policy right now if and it goes nowhere, or they try to pass it on, they go fuck off, and so again, but I think that's why they didn't, and it really would have been interesting. Jeff Greenfield, writer, used to be a CBS News, brilliant guy. He wrote a book, I think it's called "And Then It Happened," where he takes counterfactuals, like what happens if RFK didn't get assassinated, And he does
Oh,
counterfactuals on that race, and I believe on the Vietnam thing. And I think he
oh,
touches on that.
interesting.
But it's a really good book, and he's a really just a gifted writer. But I think he
Oh,
talks about that.
then everything
Then
changed.
everything changed.
Stunning
That's it.
alternate histories of American politics.
Yeah, it's like it's political porn. It's a porn book. Um,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah, yeah. um, Bill Moyers might have been Johnson's Hatchet Man, but goddamn, I loved the Moyers Journal when it was on TV.
yeah,
I loved it.
yeah.
Um,
By the way,
okay, so
a great
yeah,
example of a guy that recreated himself. And
yes, yeah,
from basically a political hatchet man, to Saint Moyers,
yeah, for sure, for
who
sure.
became extraordinarily wealthy. And by the way, he was also the first guy, or maybe the second guy, to figure out how you could become extraordinarily wealthy using public television.
Mm,
So here's the
yeah.
great little dirty secret with public television. I don't know if they've changed it, but it's literally like the movie The Producers, but legal. That if I have a show that costs $100,000 an episode, I can raise $1 million an episode, and it's fine
Oh shit!
because it's all from donors. It's all from private people, and you can say my show cost.
Right, right. It's just
And so,
fundraising.
and the bad news is that like you only eat what you kill. It's like you're constantly doing sales until you become really popular, and then you can kind of figure that out. But like he was the guy that figured out that formula, and basically you've got American
Huh.
taxpayers subsidizing any other place. You have to buy an infomercial. You got to buy a show. You got to
Right.
develop it. The networks take all the money, but literally PBS, or Corporation for Public Broadcasting, not PBS, CPB. Literally, if they like you enough, if you're saying the right things, they will give you a platform to which you can make money. Which was like Sesame Street. I mean, holy fuck. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
I mean, they have, they sell
Wow.
clothing and books and food lines, and it's not like they're this save Big Bird. No, Big Bird can give one of his five revenues from his five fucking albums and pay back taxpayers. But
Right.
that's me doing my rant, though. It's a different story. Anyway,
I wanted to touch on what you
yeah,
said about JD Vance and the
yeah,
Venezuelan gangs. It was I actually put in the notes. It was Martha Raddatz on ABC.
okay, ABC.
And I thought she looked like I actually tweeted something as a response because there was a Democrat who said, basically saying that JD Vance made him look bad in that interview. And I said, to be honest with you, I don't think that's how the American people are going to see it.
No,
And I actually dropped in that since this happened in the last 7 days, Aurora is up 450% in Google Trends. So I guess my question is, I think that the more people pay attention to, and if it was a few sporadic incidents of Venezuelan gang activity in Martha Raddatz's, Central Park West
yeah,
co-op, it would be a big fucking deal.
yeah,
But because it's in Aurora, Colorado, and low income type
right.
housing or working class apartments, oh, it's a few sporadic incidents. But let me ask you specifically about JD Vance. I saw something, and you may know if this is true. I
Mhm.
don't know how much this biography is true. This guy was born James Donald Bowman, changed his name legally to James David Bowman, changed his name legally again to Jimmy Hamill, and ended on JD Vance only 10 years ago when he got married. Do you think that there is also a liability with JD Vance by putting him front and center that says, is this guy really a Manchurian candidate of the billionaire donor class?
Yeah, I guess I did not hear the name thing. I would be a little shocked if the 10-year change was true, because by that time he had a book and he was a public figure. So I don't know. I mean, the answer to your question, let's assume it's all correct. Yes, it's always a risk,
Yeah.
and there is also people that tend to do that tend to get in trouble sooner or later because there's some misfunction. And Gary
Hmm.
Hart was, I think there's a movie called The Front Runner, which is awful,
Hmm.
but it's about Gary Hart. But Gary Hart's name wasn't Gary Hart; it was Hart Pence, and it wasn't really Gary. And his signature
Uh,
totally changed over the course of 10 years, and he kind of reinvented himself, and
Yeah.
and finally blows himself up with women in bad behavior, which would be considered quaint by today's
Right.
standards, by the way. Um,
100%.
you know, but yeah, that's always a
He would
danger.
be
But I
the
also,
evangelical candidate.
yeah, right, yeah, I'm man of God, like Russell Brand, who's now selling magic amulets
Yeah,
on,
exactly.
uh, but I think that he, what's interesting too is that how Walls kind of started hot, and now I won't say he's a liability, but it's kind of like, he was supposed to be every dad, and he's become weird uncle, you know,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
Yeah.
the whole thing with the gun was, what the fuck, all the only thing he
Yeah.
didn't do was look down the barrel, I mean,
Yeah.
I think these shells are jammed and wrong. Let me brace this with my
They're
dick.
backwards.
Yeah, let me brace this on my dick. I mean, again, I mean, I'm not a hunting guy, but I've been around
Yeah.
firearms enough to know that, like, you don't do that,
Yeah.
But and he runs like Ed Grimley, right? Remember Ed Grimley was Martin Short's character, and it's this weird
Uh-huh.
kind of thing that, and the usual right wing suspects are going, oh, he's not masculine, he's not a man. It's no, it's just this weird uncomfortableness
Yeah.
that you kind of go like, it's again, he's not every dad, he's weird uncle, and Vance
Yeah.
became like creepy dude to like, okay, normal guy.
Yeah.
And literally the Martha Raddatz thing in the debate, you can kind of see, okay, this is the appeal that he had.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah, willing to call a spade a spade. Be like, "Are you out of your mind? You're listen
yeah.
to yourself."
But by the way,
When he's
it
I
was,
think he even said that to her. When he said, "Listen to yourself." Do
yeah,
you
listen
hear
to yourself.
yourself? Like,
And it's,
um,
and it's really great. But by the way, I thought that was really kind of a remarkable moment. And no matter what you feel about him, I think if you're a normal person, you went, yeah. By the way, do you know what? I came across a great phrase. It's called. Oh, I'm going to screw it up. It's called Gel amnesia syndrome,
I have no idea what that is.
and Michael Crichton created it, and it was talking about, like, do you hear yourself? So it's a
Ah.
character. It's a character out of the book, and everybody's had the experience of reading a newspaper or seeing a
Ah.
broadcast about something, either a game they were at or something they were involved in, and it's totally fucking wrong. Not only is it wrong, it's probably the opposite of what really happened. And you go, I can't believe this bullshit. They actually wrote this. They got this totally wrong. Let me write a letter to the editor, whatever the hell happens to be. And you do that, and then you go to the
Right.
next page of the newspaper and you read it and you accept it as the truth. And I think
Interesting.
that,
Yeah.
and I think he kind of broke that wall of, like, listen to yourself. It's like, do you realize how full of shit you are? Are you in that much of a fucking bubble that it's like, So by the way, which is very similar, which helped Republicans in 18, even though it was a debacle, there were a couple races that I did that kind of survived, because MS-13 was another one that the
uh,
media was like, oh, that doesn't exist, and it's just kind of a handful, it's terrible. You're demonizing that, but MS-13 was a big thing that authorities weren't going after because, frankly, the communities being affected were poor and Latino. And I did a spot in 2018 that kind of, I think, helped save a campaign in New York, and it was an interview with a woman whose daughter stood up in school to some MS-13 kids, and they trapped her on the way home, and they macheted her to death. They macheted
oh
her and her girlfriend
shit.
to death. Yeah. And finally, action was taken. But this was like
Right.
this was MS-13 doesn't exist except when they're macheting my daughter.
Right.
But I think this gang thing is the same thing. And it's like, listen to yourself. We listen to yourself,
Totally.
right? And I
100%.
think that helps him. But,
When I was in Chicago for the convention, I got an Uber back to my hotel, and we couldn't get on from where we were because of the street closures.
yeah.
The easiest thing was to just take a surface street. And as we're driving, I'm like talking to the driver and shit. And we're stopped at a stoplight, And he's like, "Oh, you see that building over there?" And blah blah. And he's like, "But hey, no matter what," because we were pretty close to my hotel at that point. He's like, "Yeah, you're in a really cool part of town." He's like, "But don't go down this street. The
Mhm.
gangs." He didn't say MS-13, but he said the gangs own this side of the street. Like the cops won't
Yeah,
even go in there.
yeah.
And I was like, get the fuck out. Really? It shocked me. I thought that was only something from training day where there were places where cops didn't go to that extreme. I've seen in Baltimore, there are places where cops just don't pay attention, but afraid to go is something different.
Can I tell you my
So
cop
that
story?
was,
My my
yeah, please.
my cop gang, my favorite cop gang story. So I was helping a friend out, and he was working on a film, and it was about something called, I think it's called Ceasefire, and basically they take guys that have come out of prison and they enlist them, and it started as a volunteer thing. Now it's got a minimal funding, but it's a really a great program. So what happened? There's always going to be shootings, but what it gets really bad is when there are retaliatory shootings. And what happens is when there's a
Right.
neighborhood shooting, these guys get, I don't know, beepers or phones. I think it was phones. Used to be beepers, now it's phones. They get called in the middle of the night, and they say to go to Crenshaw and this corner. There's been a shooting, and these guys go and they talk to the local and the kids, especially the young men, and they said, "I've been in prison for this. You don't want to go to prison. Let's take a breath. Let's see what happens." And they calm everything down.
Yeah.
So, and I was helping my friend out with this thing. So we go to Inglewood, and we're having this meeting in a church basement, and I'm the only guy there with my friend that hasn't been in prison, right?
Mm.
And and we're having coffee, and the guy says to me, comes up to me, and he says, basically, I'm the only white guy there too. And he says to me, he gets a little nervous, and I said, "You know what? I think I'm probably in the safest place in LA right now." And he starts laughing,
Yeah.
and he says, "Yeah, but you see the women over there?" And I go to turn. He goes, "Don't look, don't look." He goes, "If shit starts with them, you are on your own." He said, "Because nobody's going to step in
Oh
between you."
shit.
He said, "Do not look at the women out of prison because and he said, keep your eyes down, man." He said, "Nobody's going to fuck with them. They're
Yeah,
not."
mind your own fucking business.
Yeah,
Yeah,
mind
yeah, yeah.
but anyway, but that was my great,
Yeah.
that was my great
Was
Christmas.
was the priest from Homeboy Industries involved with that at all? I feel like I remember reading
Yes,
something about
he
that in
was. He
LA.
wasn't at that meeting, but he was involved with that, and it was kind of an outgrowth out of
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But yeah,
Cool.
but
That's
it was
awesome. I
really
mean,
interesting
it's
to
a
meet
great
with a bunch
program.
of,
I saw that they
yeah, great guys. I mean,
Yeah.
great guys with hard lives who want to make their life. They don't want to let what happened to them happen. Anyway, all right, man. Well, look, I
All
gotta
right,
get
let's
something.
can I
Yeah,
drop you one question? Can I
yeah.
tell you one thing? USC, did you know that they have a thing where you can pay between $1,450 and $1,800 to run out with the team before a game?
No, no. That's
Can
great
I
monetization, right?
since you're a Philly, New Jersey guy, I wanted to point out, go on Twitter and search uh, USC Penn
Penn
State.
State.
A guy from Penn State paid money to run out with the team, and he's bringing the Penn State flag with him, and the
That's
whole
so
crowd
awesome.
is booing at this fucking guy. But USC didn't give a shit. They took the money, like, run.
Right, right, right.
I
That is
love
so
it.
great. That is so great. Oh my god.
I thought you'd get a kick out of that. Also, by the way, my congressman here, Michael McCall, just bought $250,000 worth of Airmark. If anybody's trying to copy trades, not investment advice either. Um, all right, Chris, I will see you next time. We have a couple of comments that maybe we'll get to in the next one, and I'll see you in a week. We'll
Yeah.
see where things are.
See you in a week. It'd be fun. Thanks, man.
All right.
Bye
Thanks,
bye.
Chris. All right, there you have it. Another episode down. By the way, whoever you are, you're my spirit animal for the balls of running out onto Trojan Field with a Penn State flag, bro. You are the fucking man. That is, I'm sure it was money well spent, by the way. I feel like Penn State should reimburse you that money. I don't know if there's some illegality in that. But if this gets to you, please hit us up. I would love to have you come on the podcast and share what that was like. Also, I'm very curious if you are the first and last person to ever be able to do that shit. All right, there you have it, everyone. I think what a good episode today. Love having you on. Like I said, we do have some comments. Wanted to get to them, wasn't able to get to them. So Rich Carroll 7510 and Paul Carey 7960. Dudes, if you want to, instead of giving us the comment, type it in, hit me up on the channel and let me know if you're interested in coming onto the pod and sharing your comment so that we can have a discussion about what you wrote. If not, if we don't hear from you, we plan on getting to your comment next week. I wanted to get Chris's input, which is why I'm not going to talk about it now. And by the way, to both of you, thank you so much for commenting. Love the feedback, love the engagement. But yeah, if you guys are down to join us on the podcast, we can arrange it. All right, that's it. Please follow these two gentlemen's example. Leave a comment. Let us know what you thought of today's episode or any of our episodes, and like and subscribe and share to anybody that you think will enjoy. All right. Until next time, next week, we have a couple contests up. So enjoy and keep an eye on the political news. We'll have lots to talk about.
Echo final scores. Analysis deep as the trench warfare set. We break it down, no sweat, no net. Violence and touchdowns, where's your bet? Candidate playbooks, lines we set. Irreverent and free, we call it out. Competition fierce, ain't no doubt. Policy blitz and a Hail Mary pass. Legislation touch